What's going on, Crimson Tide fans? Chris Daughtry here with the Alabama Football Report by Chat Sports. We are closing in on our 500 subscriber goal for the month of May. We only need 16 more subscribers on this video, so I know there's going to be more than 16 people who watch this video who are not subscribed, so help me out. Stay up to date on all things Alabama football related. Make sure you guys hit that sub button for me right now. All right, the SEC spring meetings are underway, and a potential 9-game conference schedule is a very hot topic yet again during these SEC spring meetings. And look, there are a ton of articles this morning when I got online, tried to figure out what we were going to talk about on today's show, that all were kind of using the same exact headline. How Alabama got snubbed from the college football playoffs last year could prevent a possible 9-game SEC schedule. Now, I'm not going to pick on the writers or anything like that who are using that headline because it does generate clicks. I want to pick on the people who think Alabama got snubbed last year. You lost 3 games last season, and worst of all, you lost 2 of those games against extremely mediocre teams. The argument that, everybody wants to keep using as well, if we played 9 SEC conference games, then that is another opportunity for us just to lose another game. And the College Football Playoff Committee does not care about strength of schedule. They care about wins and losses. So why do we make our schedule tougher? Why do we put a ninth conference game in there if that is the case? Well, look, back in the day when we had the BCS, wins and losses were kind of the only thing that mattered. If you lost more than one game, you didn't have any kind of shot of making a national championship. So I guess an idea that you could throw out there is don't schedule Power 4 out-of-conference games. If you're so scared about having a possible chance to have an extra loss on your schedule from scheduling a 9th SEC game, take the cupcake games and just force them down our throat. Make us watch bad football for 3 to 4 times a season like every other conference does. Now, Greg Sankey did say that he did not think that was a good idea, that could lead to a bad product on the field. And I totally agree with that. It would. But at the end of the day, you just cannot really have your cake and eat it too. Alabama did not get snubbed from the college football playoffs in 2024. They lost 3 regular season games. And more importantly, they lost to 2 teams that were absolute boo-boo. They did not deserve to make the college football playoffs last year. They got throttled for 40 points and over 400 yards of offense against Vanderbilt. You could not score a touchdown versus Oklahoma. Sure, one got called off the board that shouldn't have been called off the board, but it happened at the end of the day. Alabama against Oklahoma, they just wanted to spam those Jalen Milroe runs like they did against LSU, and it just did not work against a very good Oklahoma defense. It, wouldn't have been a thing if, they lost to 3 ranked teams in close games on the road. Then maybe you could hit me with that, hey, Alabama had a tough schedule and they lost, 3 close games against ranked teams. But it's not about wins and losses like everybody is really complaining about right now. The problem is you lost against the wrong teams last year to be able to make that argument. If you would have lost that Georgia game, the Tennessee game, the LSU game, okay, maybe then you could make that argument. All 3 of those teams were ranked when you played them. One was the eventual SEC champions, and 2 of those teams made the college football playoffs. And, the other 2 were ranked teams on the road as well. So, look, you think back to that 2022 year where you lost to number 6 Tennessee on the road. You lost to number 10 LSU on the road by a combined 4 points. I think you could have made that argument then, but, we're talking about the argument of 2 more losses. Alabama had 3 regular season losses, and the team that everybody's complaining about is SMU getting in over Alabama. Well, they only lost 1 game at the end of the day. So if you're going to argue, 1 loss versus 3 losses, I think 1 loss is probably going to win 9 times out of 10. Now, Brett McMurphy tweeted this morning. It was Kalen DeBoer talking about being left out of the college football playoffs last year. He said, you wonder what would have happened if people would have played our schedule. Would SMU have lost more than 1 regular season game if they played Alabama's schedule? Probably. But you also lost 2 games against very, very bad teams on your schedule. And I know we're talking about regular season games here, but let's not forget, Alabama also completely shit the bed versus a completely depleted Michigan team who had nearly double-digit players not playing in that game. You lost to two teams that were in the bottom 5 of the SEC this year. You did not get snubbed from the college football playoffs. And an argument that everybody wants to use is the strength of schedule. Well, let's look at the top 10 teams' strength of schedule this year. Yeah, Georgia. This is the ESPN 2024 strength of schedule rankings. Georgia made the playoffs. They were 10-2. Ohio State made the playoffs. They were 10-2. By the way, Georgia, their losses were a very close game versus Alabama and a very close game against Ole Miss. I believe both of those games were on the road for Georgia as well. Ohio State lost to Oregon, a team that made the college football playoffs. They were the number 1 team going into the college football playoffs. Ohio State did also lose to a Michigan team at the end of the year, but at the end of the day, they only lost 2 games. You cannot lose a third game and expect to make it into the college football playoffs. Notre Dame, the number 4 strength of schedule. They went 11-1. They went to the playoffs. Their only loss was a bad one against Northern Illinois. But what was it, like the second game of the season or something like that? So they did not lose again until the national championship game. Texas had the number 6 ranked strength of schedule. They went 11-1 still. Their only loss in the regular season was against Georgia, and then they also lost against Georgia in the SEC championship as well. Oklahoma, you see there, they were ranked number 9 in strength of schedule, 6-6, a really bad team, and they still beat Alabama. Penn State, the 10th ranked strength of schedule. They still went 11-1. They went to the playoffs with their only loss being against Ohio State. Alabama had the 20th ranked strength of schedule. I believe SMU had like the 40th ranked strength of schedule, but at the end of the day, in total, there were 7 teams that made the college football playoff that had a tougher strength of schedule than Alabama. Look, the biggest thing to me is there is no excuse here. It was a mentality issue for Alabama last season. I think using strength of schedule is just a very convenient excuse for Alabama fans and SEC fans to justify Alabama losing to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. And frankly, I think it's a pretty lazy argument. You know, it was a mentality issue for Alabama last year. That's what made Nick Saban so great as a head coach. He could go beat a great Georgia team in week 1, but then get the boys ready and put them in the right headspace to go beat Vanderbilt the very next week. He could go beat LSU on the road and then reinforce everybody's mindset and make sure that they understand that, hey, just because you beat LSU last week does not give you the right to think that you can just walk into Oklahoma and beat them the very next week. Last year's team did have a tendency to dwell on the past in those 2 circumstances in those losses. And then you also think about, you lost to Vanderbilt, and then you almost let that loss lead to another loss against South Carolina the very next week. You had to have the defense bail you out at the very end of the game. And Lenora Sellers, let's just be honest, had a very bad throw at the very end of the game to cause that interception. So no, I do not think strength of schedule is a good enough excuse to say that Alabama got snubbed last year. But that's just my opinion. I want to hear from you guys as well. Let me know what you guys think. Did Alabama get snubbed from the 2024 college football playoffs? Let me know what you guys think. Type Y for yes or N for no down at the pinned comment of today's show. All right, we're switching it up a little bit today, but I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Fanatics. You guys can go over to chatsports.com/Bama Trunks to get some new Alabama swimming trunks. It is summertime. I know it was Memorial Day this past weekend. A lot of people doing barbecues, going out to the river, going swimming in the swimming pool, whatever it is. It's getting hot down in Alabama right now. So go over to chatsports.com/Bama Trunks and get yours today. They are on clearance right now. So make sure you go over, hit that link. It's down in the comment section and the description of today's show. Now, I want to play devil's advocate a little bit here as well. Jimmy Stein, absolutely respect Jimmy. We used to work together as well. He had this argument that is a very, very fair argument, saying, the entities on Selection Sunday all ranked Alabama ahead of SMU, which would have put Alabama into the college football playoffs. The AP poll, the coaches poll, the old BCS simulator, the ESPN strength of record metric, which is a little bit different than the strength of schedule metric. Then you also have the ESPN FPI. So it's not just whiny Alabama fans. There is a legit debate here. I am not trying to say at all that there is not a legit debate here whether or not Alabama should have gotten into the college football playoffs. But a lot of arguments that I see people make are this hypothetical, who would have been favored, Alabama versus SMU. It really doesn't matter, though, because they did not play that game. I do think that Alabama would have beaten SMU in a head-to-head matchup. That probably would have happened. But I also thought Alabama was going to beat both Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, being favored by over 20 points in those games, and you get absolutely blown out by Oklahoma, and your defense could not stop anything versus Vanderbilt. It all comes down to the fact that Alabama lost to the wrong teams last year. And when we're just talking about the college football playoffs in general as well, you talk about the automatic bids. How about no more automatic bids? It makes no sense whatsoever. They have already agreed to just go to straight seeding. How about let's go back to the way it probably should have been from the beginning, rank the top 25 teams and the top 16, 14, 12, whatever amount of teams that you want to put in the college football playoffs, let's just have those top-ranked teams in the playoffs. I don't get the, automatic bid that they want to throw out there and, have the SEC have 4 automatic bids or the Big Ten have 4 automatic bids or whatever they want it. Just have the top-ranked teams make the playoffs. How about instead of playing 3 to 4 crappy games a year, let's just have everybody schedule only Power 4 teams. You have 9 conference games, 3 out-of-conference Power 4 games. Each of those games played against different conferences on different weekends. So then you could have the best, you could know who the best conferences actually are instead of just having these hypothetical arguments about who they actually are. Like, you can't, if you were to hypothetically have, a 9-game SEC schedule and then play 3 more games against other out-of-conference Power 4 teams, then you would have this situation where, the ACC couldn't go out there and say that they're better than the SEC when they had a losing record in whatever week you wanted to play those 2 conferences against each other. Because let's be completely honest with ourselves. The bottom half of the SEC is not very good. They could lose to almost anybody in the country. You've seen it. Auburn lost to New Mexico State 2 years ago. It could happen to any of those teams in the bottom half of the SEC. I think the top half of the SEC is good, and any of those teams could be good enough to make a national championship run. But let's not act like the entire, 16 teams in the SEC can go out there and win a national championship game. I do also think that the College Football Playoff Committee has run its course. I think we should eliminate the committee altogether. I think as far as AI has gotten us at this point, I think we could go back. I know the BCS simulator is kind of what that was, but I think we've, had 11 years or whatever it is now of the college football playoffs. I think AI has gotten good enough to where that could do a pretty decent job of actually ranking these teams. There's just too much bias when you have active conference commissioners in that room making these decisions of who, is going to make the college football playoffs or who doesn't make it. They wanted the committee originally because of that human element. They wanted to be able to use the eye test. Well, the eye test is kind of irrelevant when those eyes also have biases. So my final thoughts here on this is, the last team out is never getting snubbed. If you're getting down to it and you're arguing about a team with 1 loss versus 3 losses, the team with 3 losses is going to lose that argument 9 times out of 10. And I don't know where we're going to go from here in terms of a 8-game versus 9-game SEC conference schedule. But I do think it is weak for the SEC not to play 9 conference games and everybody else does. And I think anybody saying that Alabama got snubbed last year, at the end of the day, right now, they are just wasting their breath. Because at the end of the day, I do not think a 3-loss team should be getting into the college football playoffs.